Hello everyone, it is August 28th, 2016, and this is your Percussion episode 59. I'm Casey Cangelosi, and this is Laurel Black.
Hi.
And over there is Megan Arms.
Hello.
And of course Ben Charles is there in Texas.
Hi everybody.
So back on the show we have, if you remember from episode 57, we had kind of an abrupt end to Mr. Rosen's, he had to take off and do some things, so we invited him back to finish our conversation. So this is Professor of Oberlin Conservatory, Michael Rosen, Part 2. Hey, Michael, how's it going?
Pretty good. A little hot here in August, the end of August, but school started, so things are starting to roll along.
Did you say 100 and something?
It was 100 degrees today, which is very seldom in Oberlin. Very seldom. I thought we were in Texas with Ben.
Yeah, pretty nice weather. It's like 88 today, so not too bad.
Yeah, Ben's winning in the comfort. Hey, well, Mike, you got a cool recording in the mail you were telling us a little bit about while we were getting ready by James Wood. You want to tell us a little about how the recording came out?
This is a piece that James wrote for the Oberlin Percussion Ensemble, and it's for 6 players, and it's called Cloud Polyphonies. 3 movements, 6 players, and it's
1,000 instruments.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, I'll get to that when we get to the third. The third. Did you see it? The performance at the PAS?
Yeah.
We did it at PAS 3 years ago, 4 years ago. What do you think?
Yeah, I think 4.
What was it, Megan? Do you remember?
Maybe 4 years ago.
Something like that. Anyway, we did it there. The first movement is for 6 marimbas, and it's sort of interacting voices very quickly played, and he's supposed to be sort of the clouds of birds. So if you sort of envision a bunch of birds on a telephone line, and when they fly away together as a, as a flock, and then fly around, it almost seems like a school of fish, and that's sort of the idea behind the piece. That particular movement, by the way, is on YouTube. So if you look that under Oberlin Percussion Group and James Wood, you can find that movement, and that's on YouTube, and it's really terrific. And then the second movement is for lots of instruments, but now it's sort of clouds, and it's piano with strings in there that you pull and make vibrate, like the strings of the piano vibrate by pulling through pieces of rosined string, and gongs, and cloud bowls, and water gongs, and all sorts of those kinds of instruments, very slow movement. And then the last movement is called for 66 drums, and we used all calf heads. And you can see that on the video. I'm going to put the video on YouTube very soon. And literally 66 calf heads, and it's fantastic. And this piece is sort of like the idea of the clouds in this particular one was buffaloes running in Kansas on the plains, where you hear these herds of buffalo sort of making these thick sounds, and then thin, and then thick, dense, and it's just a terrific piece.
Wow, great.
I think it's only been performed maybe one other time by Yale with Bob Van Cise.
So I have actually a Facebook question that relates to that, and this is like the mega question here. There's a Facebook question, then I also personally have a question about this. So I'll go ahead and give you both at once, and then let you go.
Go for it.
The Facebook question is another one from Eli Gerschat, and he says, the Oberlin Percussion Group premieres at least 1 new piece a year. How do you prepare your students for a premiere, and what effect do you think this has on them early in their careers? And then my kind of mega question is, I know that you've long taken an interest in new music and premiering pieces and all, especially I guess in the 1970s with a lot of the Japanese pieces that Keiko Abe had premiered in Japan. You kind of brought to the U.S. and Europe. So if you could tell us about your experience with those pieces.
All right, let's go with Eli's question first, which is a really good question about percussion ensemble and how I pick pieces. As a matter of fact, this particular year, I've already tried to I've already asked composers, especially in the faculty here, for pieces. So that's my first train of thought, is to think of the composers who are here at school. And then I asked them to write pieces. Of course, our concert's not till April 18th, so they have plenty of time. And I think that and that performance is going to probably be 2 or 3 new pieces on that particular performance. And then we're also going to do, I hope to do a piece, a wonderful piece by Denisov called The Steamship, which is kind of a wild piece. So that'll be the finisher. Now, the next part of the question has to do with, I think it shows students that working with composers is an important part of what we do. That's what I think of. Tell you the truth, I didn't think of it directly I didn't think about it directly when I do it. It's just sort of a side effect, which is that the students begin to work with composers themselves here at school and see that as a model, which is really what we got to do. I mean, this is our age. This is our time, percussionist time. So let's go for it and get as many pieces as we can. I mean, this is what happened when the piano was being coming into its own in the mid-19th century. Violin before that. Composers would be writing pieces specifically for players, and that's how the instrument advanced, which is what's happening now. I remember when I first came to Oberlin with marimba music, there was no pieces to play. There was one piece called Fischinger Suite. Have you guys ever heard of that piece?
No.
It's a piece called Fischinger Suite. Yeah, it was
Bill
written.
Merchant's percussion literature class. Yeah.
There you go. It was one of the first marimba pieces, and actually was written for organ, and then it was transcribed for marimba. I don't know by whom, and it was just this long. You can imagine like an organ piece. So that when I left the Milwaukee Symphony and came to Oberlin, I called up Tom Sywee at University of Illinois, who had been there for a while, and I said, "Tom, tell me about this teaching thing." He said, "What is this about?" You know, here I am coming from I had students in Milwaukee, where the symphony where I was. As a matter of fact, Al Oddie was a student of mine. He was in high school at the time, and he used to drive down from Sheboygan to Milwaukee and take lessons with me. But I wasn't a full-time teacher, so I asked him about this stuff. And one of the things he showed me at the time was an album of Keiko Abe's, of course it was an LP, of Keiko Abe's music. And I was just thrilled because I considered myself a marimba player with no music to play. I was playing transcriptions and things like that, but there wasn't very much music. Maybe 1 or 2 other pieces, the names of which escape me right now. But that was about it. So when I got this album, the first thing I did was contact the composer, Miyoshi. Kind of an interesting way. I remember sitting in my room, in my office, and there was a Japanese student there who was from Japan, Japanese student from Japan. And I said, "Do you know Akira Miyoshi?" And she said, "Oh yes, very respected composer in Japan." I said, "Do you know his telephone number?" And she said, "No, of course not." I said, "Well, do me a favor, will you? Call up your parents and ask them to look in the telephone book and get his telephone number for me." And this is exactly how it happened. And from my desk, I called up Akira Miyoshi and said, "Hello," I introduced myself, and the next thing I know, I said to him, "By the way, I understand you have some wonderful music, and I like it very much. Is it published?" He said, "No, it's not published." I said, "Could you send me the music?" And he said, "Sure." And of course, within a couple weeks later, I got these Xeroxes of the original score to Tours 3, and that was what I started with. And then later on I got Time and a few of the other pieces. Did them in Europe, probably 1976 or 5, and then on an invitation by Siegfried Fink, as a matter of fact. Does that name ring a bell to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's written a lot of music, and he was sort of like the guru of Germany at the time. And then I went over there and played the pieces there. But then I played it at a PAS convention, and that sort of introduced it to America. I remember the very first time that I played the first movement. If you guys have played it, you know about the one-hand roll. Well, no one was playing one-hand rolls at that time. There was no such thing. And I got to that spot, and I said, well, what do I do now? And I just sort of played around with one-hand roll, and the next thing you know, I could do it. And I remember the first time I played the concert, when I got to that spot in the first movement with the one-hand roll, there's 3 spots, I remember the audience standing up. And people were looking, what the heck is he doing up there? Because they were just so amazed. Now, of course, now it's absolutely completely part of our technique, and nothing strange, nothing out of the ordinary. It's completely understood. The other thing was that in the first movement, in the last movement, you know, there's a part that calls for 5 mallets. And that's, again, the same kind of thing. The technique came out directly out of the piece, not separate from it. So I had the 5 mallet parts there, and I started playing it and dropped the stick and tried it again and dropped the stick, and finally after a while I could hold the stick and I could change the positions of the mallets so that I could play a third, 1, 2, 3, you know, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and also open it up and play octaves at the same time on a different section. So once again, 5 mallets and 6 mallets is de rigueur now. It's once again absolute. I remember the first time I went to Europe and did a clinic and played. I was kind of fooling around with 5 mallets. I remember the students coming in for the master class and looking just amazed at what was going on. The first concert I did was in Holland. Well, now, of course, the Dutch are fantastic at it. The Swedish guy, I mean, all over Europe. It's absolutely burgeoned, you know, starting out with Lee and Gordon here. And I remember going to University of Rochester at Eastman and doing a clinic there and talking to them about holding 5 mallets and one-hand rolls and things like that. And they were just starting with that. And then, of course, the rest is complete history. They've become experts at it. So that's what happened. That's sort of the beginning of Keiko Abe, and then of those pieces in America. And then I got in touch with Keiko Abe and said, well, could you come to America, and invited to here. And she played her first concerts here in America. Spoke no English at all. Brought her tuner, and also brought her translator, and who, by the way, worked for the Japanese Federation of Composers. If you're not familiar with that organization, you probably should get onto it, because they have some wonderful pieces that often don't get here. Japanese Federation of Composers. You could probably find it online. Sure. And Keiko Abe came in. She played all those same pieces. As a matter of fact, she played Time, and at the concert broke my low C marimba note, marimba bar, which, by the way, was on a King George.
Oh,
man.
So she cracked the bar. If you guys know the last movement, the last note, how it crescendos. And whenever I have students do that, I always tell them the story and also say, that's enough, save it for the concert.
Yep. Did you make her pay for it?
Well, it was actually interesting what happened. Her tuner was there, took measurements of my instrument, and made another bar for me when he got back. And it sounds great. Not quite as good, because obviously the King George is from 1934.
Sure. Wow.
But along those same lines, I talked to him and I said he liked the sound of the King George. Of course, we both did. Everybody does. And he figured out, he tuned it. He struck it and knew how it was made. So I said, will you do me a favor and make bars that are just like this for a Yamaha, and I'll be glad to buy a Yamaha. Mm. So we went back, and he made bars tuned to the King George tuning, which means that the minor third, the third partial, is much more pronounced. so that when he brought the keys back and at a PAS convention, we set up the bars, put it on the marimba, and we struck it, and you could hear the minor third too strong. It was not good at all. It was just out of tune.
Wow.
It was terrible. So we just packed it up, and he took it back, and I imagine that could have been the start of a King George tuning of a Yamaha marimba, but he also told me that it was not possible because if you've ever seen a King George marimba, the bars are very short, and the bars on a Yamaha are very long, and they did not want to go to the trouble of retooling the entire instrument. They would have had to make a whole new instrument, and they didn't have any eyes for that. So that was the death of the King George tuning for the Yamaha company.
So I have two questions, and I'll start with the marimba one first, since we kind of just finished that. Speaking of Keiko breaking your low C, when you teach these pieces nowadays, I think we all know that the Japanese, like traditional Japanese marimba style, is to play with these really hard mallets. Everything is real articulate and percussive. It seems like since then we've kind of acquired this taste for graduated mallets and like really big bass with like a heavy, fluffy, delicate mallet, and we like that big resonance. But to use that type of mallet
it's funny that you say that, because I'm sitting here next to a big Keiko Abe mallet.
That's funny.
Well, right. So yeah, I guess the question is, do you teach those pieces with like that traditional Japanese sound, or do you have you tried to adapt kind of the the graduated thing to it?
Well, that brings a very interesting question about, do we play Japanese music with what we would think would be a Japanese mentality or a Japanese sound concept, or we do it with our Western sound concept? It's a very interesting thing, and I think it's also one of the things that I like about it is that we can do both. What about Japanese people playing Western music with a sort of a Japanese sound, so to speak? There is a definite Japanese style which comes from their love of short sounds. Keiko uses much harder sticks and also plays cross grip, and also very high and loud and with such intensity that we would never play, we'd break bars if we did that. But she seems to do it because the important thing probably about playing loudly or playing with hard sticks has to do more with a loose wrist than it does with a hard mallet. So I think if students balance their own sound concept with the whole, which is probably important, very, very important also, and with choosing the correct mallet, then you're going to come up with what you think is right for you. I can't play it like, I didn't play the pieces like Keiko Abe. She doesn't play Western pieces like we do. She doesn't play Bach like we do. She has a very interesting, by the way, a very interesting sense of time, which is very different than our sense of time. I remember we did the Marimba Spirituals. Remember that piece that everybody's doing now? The first performance we did was with Keiko Abe at one of the conventions. As a matter of fact, I think it was at Ann Arbor. With I played percussion, Arnie Lang played percussion, and Mickey Buxman played percussion on the first performance. And I remember us having one rehearsal. We walked in and had one rehearsal, and we started playing. And then it seemed like it was all over the place. The tempo was just, we couldn't lock in. She was also rather far away from us too, which didn't help at all. Well, when we got to the entrance of the after the big solo in the beginning, when the Daiko drum comes in, Mickey Buxman was playing, and I said, Mickey, when you get to that spot, just play. Boom. Just lay the tempo down. We'll follow you, and she's such a good musician, she'll follow us. And that's exactly what happened, and it was a really terrific performance. I'm all for all of us we always talk about, whenever we get together, we talk about it being one of the highlights of our career. I'm sure we've all had those kinds of experiences about performing, haven't we? Whether it's Rite of Spring or a solo or something that we remember forever as being sort of a turning point in our career, and sort of tells us why we like music.
I have a question. Speaking of Marimba Spiritual, Laurel is actually playing Marimba Spiritual here with my students in February. And obviously, ideally you would use taiko drums for the, drum parts, but that's not very realistic for most people in the U.S. So what kind of instruments did you use and have you used since then?
Okay, we used original drums, and I think that that's what's called for, because what you need is high drums. The high taiko drums are really high and sharp sounding. That's sort of the Japanese sound. It's been done on hundreds of different instruments. I've seen it done with big tom-toms, little tom-toms, by two players, by one player. It's really, it's just crazy. But we used the little tiny drums and all Japanese drums when we played it, and also Japanese wood blocks and things like that, which are once again the sound that Keiko wanted, because she's used to hearing that sound.
It's hard to replace that shimmy daiko.
Exactly.
I think a lot of the other instruments there's a little more flexibility, but that
I think the best shimmy daiko I've heard is just like a cranked bongo. It's not the same, but an approximation.
That's what I would use. But if I were to do it, I would use a small mallet, because bongos, especially the highest bongos, it's a problem, because most people tend to play them in the center, and they don't have any ring to them. So I try to tell my students to play just off center with a smaller mallet than you would normally on the other instruments, to get a full, rich sound, even though it's high. Of course, that poses a problem when you've got other tom-toms where you need a big stick for. So there's always a compromise on any instrument. Marimba is a big compromise, which is why we're going. You mentioned before, Casey, you mentioned about the graduated mallets. It's because the truth is that the lower octave of our instrument is a different instrument than the upper octave of a 5-octave marimba. They're two different instruments. And it's a matter of compromise. What are you going to do? You're going to play, if you have a note where you want it to be rich at the bottom, but at the top you need articulation, then you may have to use maybe a graduated mallet. But even that, depending upon the piece, causes all sorts of problems with switching mallets, changing mallets. I've always found that one of the most distractive things about a marimba solo is when people change mallets. I just find it sort of stops the whole progress. Of course, between movements is a different story, but it's got to be integrated into a piece so that it sounds much more an integral part of the piece, and not just a distraction to sort of throw down 4 mallets and grab 4 mallets or 2 or whatever. So the graduated mallet is a way to go, but like I say, it depends on your on what you're playing. I mean, if you need the 2 inside mallets at the top register for very fast passages, but then you need them for low passages, you have to make a compromise.
Yeah, the Tanaka 2 movements is a big one of those. The second movement that has this big chorale, then rips right in fast sections. What do you do?
Exactly.
I always try to tell students.
Wait a second. A little hint. I play that an octave lower.
Yeah, the whole kind of second half of the second movement?
Yeah, both parts octave lower.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. The first part octave lower, and the next part octave higher, but it's still, now we're in the middle register instead of the top register.
Yeah.
I use
and
5.
It sounds nice and warm.
Mike, do you keep in touch with Keiko at all, or have you been back to Japan anytime?
No, I've never been to Japan.
Okay.
And I'm in touch with her on occasion, and of course, when I see her at the conventions, we get together and talk about the old days. I did see her about 4 years ago in Geneva when we both were the judges for the Geneva music competition, percussion competition.
Eli actually sent me a picture, I guess, from your office of you two together. An old one and a new one.
Pardon?
I said Eli sent me a picture from your office, I guess, of you two together, an old one and a new one.
Exactly. The old one was when she first came, and she was this little demure, dressed very ordinarily almost on the verge of frumpy, and didn't speak any English, and had her hair in a very sort of traditional way. And of course, the new picture, it's unbelievable. She's a movie star. Her hair is great. She speaks great English. She's got these flashy clothes, and she's a wonderful person.
I do love her clothes with the big necklaces she wears.
Yeah. She's a very spiritual person. She tells me stories about bringing a bird back to life that she held in her hands, and I believe her. She's a very unusual, special, particular person in the world. She's more than just a marimba player, but as a person, she's you're in the presence of something special when you're with her. Something unusual, something spiritual when you're in the presence of Keiko Abe.
I certainly got that sense in Nane Mamuro's masterclass, and actually, if you listen to a few episodes ago, I was talking to her and Theodore Milkov. I asked her to kind of rehash some of that on the interview, and she did. But it is some Buddhist ideas and kind of spiritual ways to connect with the audience. It was really cool thoughts, I thought.
Yeah, I asked her one time, how do you memorize so many notes and so much music? She memorizes music. She played a concerto she learned on the plane one time. She played a concerto at Carnegie Hall that she didn't. She got the music right before she left, and she learned it on the plane, and then went to the first rehearsal and played it by memory.
How do people do that? I don't get it.
I would have called it sick.
I don't know anybody who does that except for Keiko Abe. That's the only person who really does that. And I asked her about it. I said, well, how do you memorize a piece that you've never seen before? How do you do that from one, in such difficult music, so many different notes? And she said, she stopped for a minute, she looked at me and she said, well, I think of the first note. And then I think of the second note.
Yeah.
And then I think of the third note.
That's exactly what I've heard Steve Chick says, too. You just start at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, and it's simple, but what else is there?
Yeah. Wow, that's cool. It's encouraging, really, because
it is, and that gets me to another little subject I wanted to talk about, which actually relates to that, in terms of learning about like practicing, about how students practice, how do we practice? What is our method of practicing? You know what I mean? And I have some things I'd like to talk about that. How do you guys think of that, of practicing in general? I mean, what do you tell your students? How do you get them to practice?
I usually just scream at them.
That's one method, right? Well, actually, the truth is that
I guess I'll be the one to bite and say that, in my view, kind of in short, I view, there's three types of practice in my mind. There's technical practice, which is doing, scales or rudiments, that sort of thing. There's musical practice, which is, what we do in the practice room with a piece of music in front of us. And then there's performance practice, which is studio class or, really any performance, evaluating not only how the performance went, but how you felt during it. And I've yet to figure out a way that, and I don't think there is, that you can address all three at once. I think they need to be addressed independently, and the proportion of time that I spend on each would probably depend heavily on the student. For me at this point, I'd say that I spend a whole lot of my time actually doing technical practice because I want to be able to play better, and I feel fine about my musical and performance skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that practicing of all type is integrated. It's all part of the same thing. For example, if you want to memorizing a piece, right? It doesn't start after you've learned the piece. Memorizing a piece starts when you start working on the piece. One of the things I tell my students is to make sections of a piece, A, B, C, D, in a very matter-of-fact way, and to practice without hope and without despair. Just practice. And what I tell them to do is take a little piece of paper, and that they've let's say taken a movement, and this particular movement has let's say we figured out 4 sections, discernible sections of the piece, not necessarily cadential sections, but maybe registral change or whatever. It could be also harmonic changes. So we've got A, B, C, and D. And what I tell them to do is to practice the first one, A, over and over, and to take a piece of paper. And on this piece of paper, at the desk, not at the marimba, at the desk, put an A, B, C, D. Okay, then you go to the instrument, and you play that one section, A, you play it once. You put your mallets down, you walk over to the piece of paper, and you take a pencil, pick up a pencil, and put it a little mark, A, 1. And then you walk back to the marimba, and then you play it again. And then you walk away from the marimba, put your sticks down, walk over, put down 2. Do about 5 of those, and then you go to the next section, do about 5 of those, do about 5 of the C and 5 of D, and after we're starting to memorize it by now, remember, we're not thinking about, ooh, I've got to play it musically. That will come. The music will come. As a matter of fact, the more you know it, the more you're memorizing it, the musicality will start to ooze, if I can use that word, out of what you're practicing. Now we go back and we play A and B together. And we walk over to the piece of paper and write down 1. And then we do C and D together. And we mark those down. Then we do A, B, C together. Do you see what I mean? So we're doing this very methodically, without thinking about, ooh, I can't get this part. I can't get it. Oh no, I'm getting frustrated, right? You don't do that. You just play again and again, and the next thing you know, you will have memorized this piece. Now, the only caveat is be very careful about the transitions, because sometimes students will memorize this in sections, and then when they get to the first section, they have trouble transitioning to the second. So you have to concentrate on that too. But that's one of the things I tell my students. And the next thing I tell them to do is to have the music stand in front of them. Is to take that music stand, and the whole idea is to take that music stand and move it away to the top of the marimba, where it's not in your view. Because here you are learning a piece, and you're memorizing the piece, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, is that a B flat or is it a B? And then you glance up at the music and you say B flat, okay, and you go back down to the music. Right? You really haven't learned what it is. You learned it for a second. But if your music is up above, away from the marimba, way to the top of the marimba, you have to walk over, you have to look at it, you have to find it, and then you have a context. And then you look at that and you say, aha, it's a B flat, but I see where it fits. And then you go back to memorizing the piece again, and you probably won't make that mistake again. That's one of the biggest problems, is when we make mistakes, we tend to make them, if we put a mistake in a piece, we tend to make the same mistake over and over without fixing it. It sort of comes back to us. So those are some tips about practicing. And of course, if it doesn't work, if you're getting frustrated, stop, go away. You're done. Some students practice 20 minutes at a time, 15 minutes at a time. That's great. Come back later. Some students practice for 4 hours. I've also found that some students, I don't have to tell them this to. They know how to practice. I don't know why. I don't know how. But the students, you know what I mean? Some students, I'm sure you guys have found that out too. Some students,
it's intuitive for some people, yeah.
Yeah, they just can practice well. And others have come to me and said, I can't memorize this piece. And I've given them this little method, my little method, and they memorize. They say they can't believe it. I'll tell you where this comes from. It comes from Charlie Owen, who was my teacher. You guys know the name Charlie Owen? Mm-hmm. He was in the Philadelphia Orchestra. Yeah. And he used to told me to practice excerpts over and over. He said, take a pile of pennies, put them at the bottom of the xylophone, play Appalachian Spring, take one penny and put it at the top, play it again, take another penny and put it at the top. This is just, what I'm doing is just an elaboration on that same idea.
One of the best like memory check methods I ever encountered was from a pianist, and it's really extreme, and I've only done it a handful of times, but it's kind of once you think you've got something memorized, you sit down and in one go you write out the score.
Yeah, that's tough.
I've also
notes, articulations, dynamics. It works though. Like the pieces I did that with, I knew them backwards and forwards, and
I've been doing the penny thing, and if you make a mistake, you move all the pennies back and start over.
Yay! Great, good idea.
Builds up, it sort of artificially makes you nervous, because when you get to your 9th out of 10 run-throughs of Porgy and Bess, you don't want to miss the second to last note. It's like.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, I don't think that's a bad idea. What we want is, by the way, we want nervousness in our practicing. I hate to tell you, we want to try to create a situation where we get nervous and we focus, because that's the way it's going to be when you have to play it for an audition or in the orchestra. You get one shot. An orchestra audition, you walk in, they say play it, and then you make some mistakes and you walk away. That's it. So what you want to try to do is create that situation, and I do it with several ways with my students. One of the things I do is I take a snare drum, a very buzzy snare drum, and I put it by the marimba, so that when they play, it starts buzzing. And then, of course, their attention, their focus is taken away from the instrument. But I tell them to focus. And after a while, they don't hear the snare drum anymore, and they're focusing in on their piece. Another thing I do is I have a student play through a piece. I say, do me a favor and play this thing now. And I set it up so that at 10 after 1, I'm going to have a student come in. And I'm going to have them make noise in the room. Maybe pick up an instrument. Maybe slam the door. And also to do things. I said to the student who's playing, I say, okay, start playing your piece, play it through. But if there's any noise or anything happens, you just keep on playing, okay? And sure enough, the person comes in at 5 minutes after, and they're right in the middle of playing a Bach, a partita or something like that. And boy, is that great for concentration.
I usually take a chainsaw, like wave it around in the room.
Anything that works, I like that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Hey, well,
one more thing that I tell students to do is to play in different places in different instruments. So I have them go into the orchestra room when they pass by and they see nobody's in there. Run in and play your Porgy and Bess or whatever it is. Just play it one time. Don't play it 2 times. Once, boom, walk out. If you walk past the practice room, walk into there, play it once, walk out. Play it on different instruments. Can you guys see my puppy here?
Oh, yeah. There's a puppy.
Can you see him? Hi.
Oh.
That's my
what
puppy.
kind of dog is that?
He's a Bernese mountain dog.
He's beautiful.
We just lost Laurel.
Laurel finally said something.
Because he wants to go out.
Oh,
so, hey, take me out.
That's great.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Casey. What were you going to say?
Oh no, nothing at all. I was making that very important chainsaw joke, but it was okay. It was done.
I like that. That's also instills fear. We want to do fear in the students too.
Hey, well, speaking of auditions and playing under pressure, Megan was going to share a quick segment with us from a Rhythm Scene article. She interviewed the fella who did the Detroit Symphony internship that has this like really, I guess, like a viral YouTube video. So Megan, what do you got for us?
Yeah, well, the percussionist's name is Joshua Jones, and this interview is in the June issue, or the August issue of Rhythm Scene. And I actually didn't interview him myself. It was Nathaniel Gorek. They were both TAs at Interlochen this summer. That's where I met them. But I had seen this video of Josh's a couple of months ago when it came out, and I thought it was so great because it was very, very well produced, and he was basically approached by a series or a website called Uproxx, Uproxx, and that series, they have a series called Uncharted where they go find musicians and tell their story, profile those musicians, and it's sponsored by Honda. So big sponsorship there. You can tell why this is so well produced. But typically on this Uncharted series, they feature pop musicians, very seldom classical musicians, or if at all. This might be the first time they've featured a classical musician. And I was trying to think of other times classical percussionists specifically have been featured in a film or something. And now we've been represented in Hollywood as percussionists by Whiplash and by Drumline.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to see that ways that people choose to profile percussionists in different genres. And this is a short film. It's about 6 minutes, 7 minutes, telling Josh's story. But it did go viral. It's on several different websites, so it's kind of hard to track the total number. But when it went on Facebook, there were 2.8 million views, like in a very short amount of time.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I thought it would be interesting for someone to interview Josh about this experience and of being the subject of a viral video. And I guess he got like 500 Facebook requests right after Facebook friend requests after that. And in the interview, he talks about how this was one of the most impactful things because people were contacting him asking for advice on how to practice or his story or, African Americans making it in the classical music world and just all kinds of different things. And he is the type of person that loves to help out and loves to mentor people and be an inspiration for people. So I think it was a very touching experience for him, and I think he was the perfect subject for this video. So check it out. We'll post it in the... Go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say, he's just such a positive person about everything. You can tell, like hard worker, and it's an awesome little segment on him.
Yeah, and he just finished a 1-year fellowship with the Detroit Symphony, and now has just moved back to Chicago. But one of the interesting things that he does every day is he does 800 claps. So you can see him doing this in the video, but he does this and 800 claps every day. And I've seen him do it in person, and it's just like, whoa. He doesn't get tired. It's pretty insane. He's got some really fast hands.
Is there a reason for that?
I think it's just building stamina and building particular muscles.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah. So, I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this today, because, Mike, I know that you have had a lot of experience playing with orchestras, specifically the Milwaukee Symphony, as principal percussionist, but also your bio says the Cleveland Orchestra and Concerto Orchestra, and several summer music festivals. So I'm curious to see where you think the orchestral percussion world is heading and how it's changed throughout the years.
Well, it's changed. I remember when I got the job in the Milwaukee Symphony, it was straight out of college. I was in University of Illinois, got my master's degree, and all the other guys were there. That was a big contemporary music scene at the time, and with all sorts of fabulous composers were there. Larian Hiller and Herbert Brun and Kenneth Gaburo, if you know those names, and Salvatore Martirano were there. And there was a bunch of percussionists there who were just fantastic, Mike Ranta among them, who used to practice all contemporary music. And here I was in the practice room practicing my role. And of course, when we got done, I got a job in the Milwaukee Symphony, and they sort of didn't, because there wasn't so much of a place to go then. There is now, with Ace Blackbird and Ice and Steve Schick and his group and and all sorts of places now where you can express yourself. But at the time, there wasn't very many places to do it. So I remember I went to the Milwaukee Symphony, I auditioned, I got the job, and I told everybody that there were 16 people who auditioned. Well, everybody was amazed. 16 people, and you got the job? Wow, you must be fabulous. It's unbelievable. And of course now, it's 250 people come to an audition. And the other interesting thing about the 250 people for me at an audition that I noticed is that, a good third of them could do a damn good job at it too. Maybe even more. Maybe even 50% of them could do it. So then it becomes a matter of style. It becomes a matter of the moment. It becomes a matter of the place, the time. Is it your time to get the job because you've practiced more? I know some people who practice unbelievably and don't get a job because they were too mechanical. And then other people who don't get a job because they're too musical, too idiosyncratic. I think that there always will be a place for percussionists in the symphony orchestra, because it's interesting. When I remember a while ago, if a person got a job in a symphony orchestra, they stayed in the symphony orchestra. They didn't leave. They didn't leave. But now, percussionists are leaving after they stay for a while. So people who come to mind is a timpanist in Minneapolis, who was in the Pittsburgh Symphony for a while, Peter Kogan. He went and became a blues drummer and drove a taxi in New York because he just didn't want to do it anymore. Then he went back to the symphony in Minneapolis, and now he is playing in a jazz group. So there's so many more opportunities for people, and there's more turnover than there used to be a while ago. But of course, now it's contemporary music that it's being the big field. The Los Angeles Percussion Ensemble, Talujan, Amadinda. When I was starting out, there was just the Strasbourg. That was the only group. Of course, Al Adi, Black Earth Percussion Ensemble. By the way, Black Earth is going to be honored at the PAS convention, so I really suggest everybody go see that.
Oh, great!
That's going to be awesome.
All the members are going to be there.
It's so cool.
It's really fabulous.
This basic's going to be really exciting because Ben's going to go.
All right. That joke never gets old, does it, Casey?
Oh, yeah.
Ben, are you planning the app percussion reception?
I am. We'll have
Yeah, you should. All the people who you had on your podcasts. A podcast party.
We should have a hang.
So,
you're invited.
Mike, in the Weston, where they'll all be there already.
Mike, I had a quick question about what you were just talking about. You said when you were at Illinois, you were practicing your snare drum roll. A lot of people were practicing contemporary music. One thing that I've heard quite a bit, and I think I heard Ron Fink talking about this, is it used to be the case that everyone played drum set, even the classical people, and now there are quite a few people that get into very fine college programs that have never touched a drum set. Was that your experience?
No, I don't think so. I happen to have played drum set and worked my way through college, playing in bands and things like that. But there was a lot of people who didn't play the drum set, and now I get a lot of students who don't. And I suggest that they do take drum set at during our winter term. We have this winter term during January where students can pick their own project, and I suggest that they do that they practice. But it's become so specialized that I'm not sure just a guy could just walk in and do it in a symphony. They have specialists now, it seems, who do that. I played drum set in the Milwaukee Symphony when it was needed for pops concerts and things like that. But for example, Freddie Buddha played in Boston. He was the drum set player, and he wasn't in the section. So none of the other guys in the section did that. At one time, it was if you could play a little rock beat, if you could play a little Latin, if you could play a little bit of country western kind of style. But now it's more specific than that. You really got to be a really good snare drum set player, I think, to do that. That's been my experience.
Speaking of then and now, actually all the way back to when we were talking about commissions, it was a while ago now, actually we talked about this on our last episode we were on together. Laurel and I were doing the Stanton Festival here in the area, and my colleague Eric was giving the premiere of his percussion trio, and he had a little pre-concert talk, and he was telling all these interesting things about the piece, and a lot of contemporary techniques and a lot of really new ideas. And this nice guy asked a question. He said, and I'd love to know how Mike would respond to this, but this nice guy, he didn't mean it in a condescending way or anything. He said, you know, most of us here in the audience are still trying to wrap our head around Beethoven, or even get a chance to hear all Beethoven's works, because there happened to be a bunch of Beethoven being played on the same evening. So he's kind of saying, you know, why are you trying to do all this new stuff when the old stuff still needs to get out there? So it made me think of Michael Rosen and all these commissions you do every year. You know, when do we, you know, is ionization old now? Should we still, you know, how do you feel about that, or how would you respond to that question?
That's an interesting question, but that's been the way of music sort of forever. It was always the most modern thing had to be done. I mean, Mozart didn't play music from Monteverdi in his time. They needed a new piece. They wanted a new piece. The only thing that's changed is the language. Perhaps, I know people come up to me and they say, well, you know, I don't understand that music. New music, I don't understand it. And I say, well, do you like Brahms? And they say, yeah. I say, do you understand Brahms?
No.
And they say, no. But, you know, of course, the response is no, but it's, I know it. It's familiar. So it really has to do more with familiarity. Right now, the main thrust of contemporary music is in colleges. That's where all of us, are doing the main thrust of contemporary music. That's where composers end up teaching and composing. Very, very few are out in the field making money just composing, unless, of course, it's for films. And I think that's a different, but to be on the avant-garde, the edge, there's very, very few. I don't know, you just have to, I know that when we just did a concert at Roulette in New York. You know Roulette? There's a place in Brooklyn. It's a club.
I don't.
It's a really fantastic club. And we did a piece by a former student of mine whose name is Adam Rudolph. And it's a very complicated piece with polyrhythms and cycles and all sorts of things like that. So we did it twice. I played it once. And now I explained there's two things about that. First of all, that I explained it. I said, now listen to the cycle here. He's playing 5, and he's playing 7 on top of it. And I took the piece apart and had him understand it and listen to it, and then they got it. So there was 2 aspects of it. The first aspect is that it was explained to them.
Yeah.
They understood that. The other aspect of it may even have been more important. They heard it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is what I mean by familiarity. They've heard Brahms' First Symphony 100 times. Of course you're familiar with it. You haven't heard James Wood's Cloud Polyphonies but once. And we're the people who appreciate that. But we can't, you know, it comes back to the idea of, do we pander to the audience and give them what they want? Or do we write what we want? Or do we play what we want, what moves us? And it seems to me that in the pantheon of the expression that human beings have, there's place for both.
Yeah, and I think
there's no popularity of both, but there's place for both, and you can't hold it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mark Applebaum kind of has this thing as a composer where he says, I work at Stanford, you know, a research university, and my colleagues in the science fields are expected to research new things, and the point isn't to find something that works, it's to see what's out there and see what does work and what doesn't work. Yeah. And so he's his kind of analogous thing for music is he's like, I'm not going to write Beethoven symphonies because we know what those are. As a composer today, especially working at a university, it's my job to research something new. And I think that all this week he's done quite a bit of that.
I'm not sure if research is the right word. I think that the right word is expression.
Yeah,
happens to delve into the idea of research, okay,
yeah.
But
research in quotation marks, yeah.
It's rather cold to say, you know, this is research music. What do you mean researching what? You're expressing yourself, period. That's really the important thing. how we all express ourselves, the kind of music we choose. I'm sure you have students, one student who picks a piece for his recital, another student would never pick that piece.
Right.
He wants another piece for his recital. I mean, the students are learning. We're all in the process, and so are we, in the process of learning, in the process of finding out what it is that moves us, that touches us. One of the things that bothers me a little bit about rock music is that it tends to be a rather narrow expression of the human condition. There's lots of things we could write about that we are in contemporary music that they don't do in rock. I mean, how about pathos? How about tenderness? How about soft? How about what else? Give me some more ways that we as human beings express ourselves. And it seems to be rather narrow, I should say, rather narrow in the field of rock. Although there are some interesting things going on in that too. But this is what I like about contemporary music.
Too many tattoos also.
Yeah. You know, so wait a second, guys. Wait a second. I just found something.
You have a tattoo? Let's see it.
That's what I thought he was going to say.
I just got this new email.
I just found something on my desk. Here it is. Can you see it?
Is that your social security number?
No. Here's what it is. Here's what it is. I was in the Milwaukee Symphony, okay, and I don't remember how much I was making. I don't remember.
Oh.
But I auditioned for the Indianapolis Symphony, probably 1968. Something like that, 69, and I got the job, okay? And here, can you read what it says here at the top, how much they were going to give me? Can you see it?
$185.
Right.
Plus $300 for moving.
Right, $185 a week.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, I did not take the job.
Full-time position, huh?
Well, it was principal percussion.
Yeah.
In the symphony, I didn't take it because it was sort of a sideways movement. Anyway, it sort of refers back to what you were saying before. Maybe you can edit it to get this back when we were talking about how it's changed, how things have changed. That's one of the ways.
Oh, that's cool. No, I think it's totally appropriate right there. Hey, speaking of things we were saying before, Ben and I cooked up a quick surprise for you. Let's see if I can do this. With the power of the internet, Ben was able to send me this photo. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
You see Keiko Abe?
No.
No.
It's just your Facebook page.
I don't know why. Let me try again. Why is that?
Oh, it's in Windows Photo Viewer, not online.
Yeah, but it should be able to show you a photo too. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Here you go.
Yep, that's the one. That was taken about 4 or 5 years ago in Geneva.
That's great. So, yeah, Ben mentioned Eli, your incoming students sent him the photo, so he sent that to me real quick, and
great.
And there's this one
there's
too.
The first one, and she signed it. Isn't that wild?
So anyway, just to show everybody that, it's pretty cool.
So
hey,
cool.
You guys. Megan, Ben, Laurel, thanks so much. Mike Rosen, thanks for coming back. It's great to finish up that conversation. That was an episode that should have been 2 hours, and so it looks like we got it. So
actually, we never finish.
Yeah.
I know, right? Yeah. So we'll see you next week.
Okay.
Cool.
Right, guys.
It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys, and I hope. Will I see you guys at PAS?
We'll be there.
Yeah, we'll be
there. So Casey's
Let's get together. Okay, lunch
Ben will invite you to the reception.
Okay, lunch is on me. Okay, we'll get together, and lunch is on me.
Hey, awesome. Thanks. That sounds great.
All right, we'll do it.
All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Everybody. Thanks so
Bye.
much. Thank you, Mike.